Team, this edition of Behind the Business contains a video with incredible and powerful content, a dialogue and discussion of our colleagues talking about social and racial injustice, how they're feeling, what they're experiencing, what they're learning, and how they're committed to making sure we make the world a better place. I hope you will take the time to listen all the way through the entirety of the video. Engage in a dialogue and conversation with your coworkers, with your community about what you're learning, and then commit to action. We are clearly at a crossroads and have an opportunity to seize this moment and move from a moment to a movement of a commitment to equality, to dignity, to respect for everyone. And right now we have to seize the moment and commit to listening, to learning, and acting. My thanks to the team that pulled together this video, and my thanks to all of you in advance for your commitment to making sure we take the opportunity to learn and to act.
All right, I want to welcome everyone to our Verizon Business Group Behind the Business series. Great opportunity for us to get together today with leaders in the business as well as employees in the Verizon Business Group and talk about corporate responsibility during this time of social injustice. With that said, my name is Eric Cevis. I'm the president of our Verizon Partner Solutions organization, Global Wholesale, under Tammy Irwin.
And hi, I'm John Frantz. I lead the legal team for VBG, and I'm very excited to be here for this important conversation.
Hi, my name is Shanice Jones. I'm a retail small business manager out in Texas, and I'm really excited to be here with you guys to have this conversation.
And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Payton Perrine. I'm a manager solutions architect in the Verizon Business Group out of Los Angeles.
So some people who don't have personal experience with racism don't understand how it manifests itself in our society. Could you share your experience with us, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing about racism. I think when we heard the word historically, we immediately went to very bold hate crimes and, white mask over faces and crosses burning. But the thing about it is systemic racism is very sneaky. It's not always overt and in your face. And I think that's why, we're hearing the comments from so many people like, wow, I didn't realize that this was the situation. I didn't realize it was that bad. I didn't realize that this was the state of where we were as a country. As far as my personal interaction with it, I've had both. I've had overt, and I've also had the subtle things, of walking into a particular store and maybe being looked at a little too long, or going to a restaurant and not getting immediately helped. But the last thing I'll say on it is, in the African American community, a lot of the times when you see the headlines and of people dying in the streets, or the news articles, you really see yourself in that, whether you've experienced or not. You feel it on such a deep level and in such a personal way, that is just something that whether you've had it in your face or not, you've experienced as an African American.
Thank you, Shanice. Eric?
Yes, interesting as we think of the question about racism. I look at the journey through life, and so often I look at the realities of whether I'm jumping on an elevator and I notice that a lady is now clutching her purse more tightly, or I find myself walking around the mall and being followed in the store that I'm going into, or found myself pulled over by police officers. Thinking through it, I didn't think I had done anything wrong at all, but got me concerned. So I pulled over, I looked at the license plate, called my home, let them know the license plate number of the car that had pulled me over, and I kept the phone on a speaker so people could hear the conversation, hoping that nothing went wrong, but if it did, I'd have the support I needed. So it's interesting in life, you'll run into different aspects of racism, and therefore how you handle that and how you move the conversation thing forward is really one of the big reasons, and I'm glad why we're here today in corporate America talking about this and hopefully encouraging these conversations amongst leaders as well as employees. And it's great having two of our employees here today representing our bold ERG, and they happen to work in the Verizon Business Group, so you're getting to hear candid dialogue on behalf of our bold employees that work in VBG. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Payton?
Yeah, well, I've experienced racism both personally as well as professionally, whether it's when, I was young riding through my neighborhood and, a person called my dad and I the N-word and said, go back to your neighborhood when that was our neighborhood, or being turned down for a promotion because I didn't technically fit the team culture, even though I was more qualified than the person who was hired for the job. So there's definitely a lot that happens in our society that needs to change for sure. And then in addition to that, a lot of Black people also it's not just this generation or the people who are alive today that are impacted, right? They're impacted by the stories that were passed down by their grandparents or their great grandparents or their aunts or uncles or cousins of things that have happened to them that were unjust. So.
Good. Thank you so much, Payton and Shanice, both for providing some perspective on that. One of the other thoughts is clearly, through these last week or two, especially, I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of our Black and white colleagues in the business. And talking to a mom as well as a dad, I heard them mention that they're concerned to actually let their teenage son leave the house. And just speaking on my own behalf with a 17-year-old son, I've noticed it's been a little different for me. I find that I can't go to sleep at night until I know my son Christian has gotten home. He just got his driver's license in February, and now I wait to make certain that he's back in the driveway before I find that I can actually go to sleep, knowing that I have talked to him about what we call the talk. So often when people talk about the talk, it's not necessarily the talk about, hey, son, I want you to make sure you put your windows down in your car if you get pulled over by the police. I want to make certain you put your hands up on the steering column so they can be seen at all times, and make sure you address the police individual as officer and be respectful. Have either of you had any experience like that, or have any similar conversations have you run into here recently?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a saying in our community, it takes a village to raise a child. So while I don't have any children myself, I've definitely found myself in those particular situations. And so, I think it goes even beyond that conversation of what to do, when you're interacting with law enforcement, because, the things that, most people would consider very mundane activities can turn into a very different situation as an African American. So when you think about Ahmaud Arbery jogging, when you think about Breonna Taylor sleeping in her house, when you think about Christian Cooper actually bird watching in Central Park, and all of these people were criminalized simply just for existing. And so that talk really boils down to, when you're in situations and you're seeing it turn, you have to kind of put down some basic things that people value: ego, pride, indignation of why is this happening to me? You just don't have the luxury of reacting like that, because that very mundane moment has now turned into a life-defining, life-changing, maybe life-ending moment for you. And so you really have to fast forward to the end to say, how do I get out of this situation safely so that I can live to fight another day or see another day? And that's really the basis of how sad, but how necessary that conversation is.
Payton,
Yeah, and Shanice, yeah, I was going to say that a few weeks ago, my wife and I had to have our version of the talk with our two little boys. My oldest son is going to be turning 10 in a couple of weeks, and my youngest son is 6.5. And I got to admit, I was really upset and I was really frustrated, because why should I have to have a talk with my kids about how they need to interact with the police when the police should be there to protect them? Because I know that the classmates of my kids aren't having that same talk. And that was really, really frustrating. But it's necessary, unfortunately, in where we are right now. And I'm just hopeful that through action and through change, that won't be the case.
I've heard some people say in response to Black Lives Matter that, quote, all lives matter. Could you tell me how that comment is received? Payton, could I please start with you?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of times people misinterpret that quote of Black Lives Matter, right? Because they maybe don't have a whole lot of interaction with people of color, or they only listen to a certain train of thought on the news. But when people say Black Lives Matter, it doesn't mean that no other lives matter. It means that right now, like, Black people are in a pretty jacked up situation, and things need to change within our country. Things need to change in our hearts. You know what I mean? Across this country, people need to really understand where our history comes from, how this country was founded and started, and kind of understand that so that we can all move forward together. But Black Lives Matter doesn't mean that no other lives matter. It just means, hey, like, our house is burning down right now. Could you grab your bucket and help us out, so to speak?
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, this has been an interesting one because I'm also of that mindset that clearly we all as human beings, I believe a lot of us have been trained on the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And clearly the belief structure there is all lives do matter, 100%. And I believe, Payton has said it well. In All Lives Matter, I was listening to a talk by Bishop T.D. Jakes on this past weekend. And he said, yes, all lives matter, comma, do Black lives matter? And that's the key of the conversation there. As Payton said, we're at a heightened place, and candidly, for many of us as African American Black male or females, have felt this kind of tension and pressure and unrest for a good period of time. Have we talked about it? Probably not. It's almost like you don't talk about politics in the office. So do we talk about racism in the office as concerned about your careers? And here's the biggest key. All lives do matter. We are at a heightened state now with the things that we're seeing, Black and American female and males that are being shot, being killed, or things such as economic differences, healthcare differences. We continue to see that educational differences. And so across the board, these differences are things that we need to continue to work on to get to a better sense of equality so that all lives matter, including the Black lives that matter.
Thank you, Eric. Shanice?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with both Peyton and Eric's sentiments. The only thing that I would add to it is that, we really have a societal trend right now where we take very simplistic statements or actions, and then they get thrown into the world, and it's immediately skewed from what was initially meant or politicized. And then we add all these things on top of it to where we really, really buried the point with useless dialogue that I just call a distraction. And so I think Black Lives Matter is one of the biggest examples of that out in the media. We're really just burying the lead at this point. We need to just depoliticize it because it's not a political comment. It's literally just saying Black Lives Matter. And it's really just the African American community asking for liberty and justice and equality, these pillars that our country were built on, that is the promise of America. That's as simple as I can put it. And that's, as simple as what Black Lives Matter means when you remove all of the other rhetoric that's added on top of it.
Thank you, Shanice. So let's move to a discussion about what corporations can do to address the problem of racism. Eric, how can corporations helpfully get involved?
Yeah. Now, John, I think this is an excellent question. And I think the best way corporations get involved is encourage and support the conversations. It's one thing, I would say, to listen, a second thing to learn, but a third thing to take measurable action. And that's really what I've marveled watching Hans Vestberg, our chairman and CEO's leadership moment there, where he addressed this head on right out of the gate, and I believe gave a license to the entire corporation to have the conversation. And beyond his words, he backed it up with the $10 million that they were going to put into groups like the NAACP, National Action Network, Rainbow Push Coalition, Legal Defense Fund, is really to help educate and give dollars for training to come out of those places to help corporations better understand how to have these conversations. I'm encouraged with the up to speed conversations we have been having. Today was so powerful to hear. It's not, just a moment, it's a movement, not a moment. Saying, let's not let this too pass and run for the next crisis that comes up, but really make this a movement that affects change. So Donna Lyden, the communications team, she sent a nice little 5 things to know piece in email to all the employees. Once again, trying to help with the conversation, because it's one thing to have the words, it's another thing to have the action. Dollars are good, but it's also better to continue the training and the journey, because we realize that everybody is at a different place, whether you're just starting in this conversation, you've been in it for a while or a long while. Recognize where you are, drive awareness, and move forward. John, I would turn one question to you on this corporation piece, because more and more we're hearing employees say they're not sure how to have the conversation. They don't want to use the wrong words in the conversation. And just be interesting on your perspective relative to maybe how do we help encourage people to, it's okay to recognize what we all see in the news every single day. And if anything, it may be somewhat insultive if you don't open and have the dialogue. Any background there, John?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just think this is an absolutely crucial conversation to have at this moment. And I've had conversations with many of my white colleagues who have wanted to get involved in a conversation on this topic, and they've been afraid to approach it because they don't know the words to use, or they're afraid that if they say something, they run the risk of making it worse. But I think it's really important to acknowledge what a difficult time this is, in particular for our Black colleagues. As you guys have said so eloquently, the issues that we've seen over the course of the last few weeks are not new. These are things that have been going on for hundreds of years in this country, and these are the most recent manifestations of it. But when you add the all of the strain that we've all been dealing with coronavirus, although as you noted, that too has not fallen as an equal burden on all of us, and then add all of these issues, it's taken a hard time and compounded it in an extraordinary way. And I from conversations with my Black colleagues, I've been trying to sort of access an experience in my own life that I could connect to it, for how difficult this is. And the thing that I kind of came to was the death of someone who is close to you. I've seen some of my colleagues dealing with the type of pain and frustration and anguish that goes along with an event like that. And if you have something like that happens in your life, and you're working with a person and they don't address it, they just jump right to business, and they don't ask how you're doing, and want to have the conversation about the thing that they know is at the forefront of your mind, then that sends a message in its own right. What that says is, I'm not interested in who you are as a person. I'm not interested in what you're going through. I'm not interested in learning about your experience. And so we've passed the point where it's a neutral thing, if it ever was, to stay silent. We've reached a point now where not addressing it is making a statement, and it's making a very negative statement. And then Eric, to your point also, I would say there's never been an easier time to begin these hard conversations, because I think the company has done an extraordinary job in giving us a set of tools in order to do that. We started with Hans and his inspirational talk. We've had so many great sessions on Up to Speed, including some mentoring and some guidance on how to begin these conversations. We had the things that Donna sent around. We've got resources to read and to think about that the company has given us. And then we've had all these conversations that we've been having that are kind of easy to refer to. Hey, what did you think about the behind the business segment this week? That's an easy way to start the conversation right there. So so the barriers are down to starting it, and I just think it's crucial for people to do it. Shanice, maybe I could turn back to you, and maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how you think corporations can get involved in this.
Yeah, definitely. I think corporations are platforms, and it's important that when you have a platform where you're serving a very diverse customer base, when you're doing business with very diverse partners, that you make sure that you are shouting inclusion and diversity from the rooftop. So very proud of Verizon for their customer facing and their public comments. very excited about the $10 million that Eric mentioned, because we were intentional in how that money went to the organizations, and we're following the money, keeping tabs on the money, making, just being interested in how it's being allocated, so we can really see a ROI there. Because I think, I agree with what you both have said. It starts with conversation, but conversation has to lead to some pretty critical realities, and then we have to move into action. So, what can companies do within the company? I think you have to be vigilant, because diversity and inclusion are not things that happen by accident. It has to be purposeful. You have to keep watch. You have to pay attention. And then the last thing I'll say is, we can't just rest on our laurels with the things that we have in place that we think are working and say, okay, we have that. That's fine. Let's figure out something else. We need to go very deep into even the processes that we think answer these issues are in place, and make sure and double check that they are serving that purpose, and if not, make the necessary changes. Because at the end of the day, it can seem like a very lofty task to say we want every employee at Verizon not to just hear this message, but see this message and feel this message. But the fact of the matter is, we are a company of people. And so I think it's very important for our leadership in the company to lead from the front. You have great reference points from Hans's conversations, all of the activities that Bold are doing. So you have that crutch there to go into that conversation a little bit more confidently. And then again, make sure that we're not just talking the talk, that we're walking the walk. And again, the company is huge, and it could be a huge ask, but that has to be the goal. Anything that we do, it should really answer that call for every single employee to feel that in that environment. And I think that's the ultimate measurement of success, of how well we handle this and move forward.
Thank you, Shanice. Payton?
I think companies can provide opportunities either through training or mentorship or development to help the situation. I think that is very key, developing a pipeline of viable candidates that are diverse, that kind of look like our society, that bring different perspectives to the table, that can ultimately lift up the business, right? Whether it's our business or any other business, right? It's proven that diversity of thought lends to success. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you so much, Shanice and Payton, for the thought there. And we've John teed up the conversation about corporations. Let's talk a little bit from your perspective on what can leadership do. For example, we clearly called out Hans's initial foray there. Christy Pombianca, our lead for human resources, has been a tremendous voice on the up to speeds, putting links together and toolkits together, making certain that EAP and other tools are available for us. I know Magda Yazeri, our Chief Talent and Diversity Officer, she sponsored a call with our ERG leaders to promote solidarity across ERGs, so that Bold is able to talk to the Hispanic Support Organization, to our military organization, to our Pride organizations, etc. And so once again, leadership taking steps there. So very pleased that Hans and Christy, as well as Magda, have taken a lead, as well as the business unit leads. I've seen, Tammy Irwin do this in VBG, opening up and having these conversations. And we see this across the board with our media group guru, as well as Ronan on the consumer group side. So it's powerful to see. I think Matt Ellis has a nice piece that his group has done in finance even. As many have said, we can't seem to get African Americans, blacks in finance. And so any other thoughts, and Shanice, I'll come back to you again initially here. Any other thoughts of what more do you think leadership could do over and above some of the things leadership has taken on so far?
Yeah, I think it's incredible. Everything that you just said is incredible. Leadership is getting every resource that the company can give them to feel comfortable, to have the conversation, and know that we're all together in this, and we're moving forward together, right? What I will say beyond what the company is giving us, I would implore people to go out on their own and get information because, we've said on this recording that it's not a new issue. So that's good and that's also bad. The positive side of that is there are a lot of resources even outside of our company that you can go to and really learn, one about the issue, but two, the African American experience. And there's a lot of different avenues to do that. So if you're wanting to see the Black experience, I would say, hey, go pick up an Ava DuVernay film. Look at what John Singleton did. They tell beautiful stories. If you're a movie buff, if you like music, maybe go pick up some Common, maybe pick up some Tupac, if you enjoy that, and maybe listen to some conscious rap. If you like books, you can pick up Langston Hughes. You can, pick up Toni Morrison. You can pick up Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, which I'm currently reading right now. So you have all of these in the world that can really speak to how you learn and really give you an inside view into the experience.
And Payton, thoughts there?
I think leadership can really challenge themselves about okay, do I have any walls that need to come down? Do I have any biases that I need to address myself? And then really encourage that culture of curiosity, not just within your immediate leadership team, but then also their direct reports as well, right? I know all the time leaders within the business will have a skip level meeting just to kind of take the pulse of how everything is doing, but it's very focused on specific metrics, right? So maybe those types of meetings for diversity and inclusion as well. So, I think Verizon has put out a lot of great resources. We just need to make sure that this isn't just a fleeting moment in time because there's a whole bunch of angry people walking the streets. This needs to be something that's done consistently and on a regular basis.
Great feedback.
Hey, can I just jump in on that? Because you said something that sparked something in me. I'm sorry. So I'll just say this. I think we can all agree on equality. I think everyone wants that. But I think, the other reason we come to work is to have a profitable company, be successful, be innovative, and continue to move forward. And so if we don't agree on anything else, I think everyone can agree that when you have diversity of thought, that leads to innovation, that leads to great ideas, which leads to our bottom line, which is to be profitable and be an industry leader. So I think we can all just agree that that's just good business sense. It just makes sense.
Yeah, no, I love that. Shanice, so much. It reminds us of our credo, right? Where we talk about, it's not just the right thing to do. It makes business sense, right?
Absolutely.
As well. Great.
Yeah, and that just fits perfectly into our next question, which is how does diversity and inclusion fit into the conversation, and what can we do to get more diverse voices at the table? Yeah. Janice, you want to continue with that?
Yeah. So definitely what I just said, how do we get more diversity in the workplace? Again, I think it goes back to vigilance. You have to be paying attention to it. I think that people tend to be of the thought that if, I don't want to take into consideration that you're a woman, I don't want to take into consideration that you're an African American. But the fact of the matter is when you're saying, I know it sounds nice because it says you're seeing me as a person, but when you say you're ignoring a very large part of what makes me me, you're not accepting me wholly. You're not accepting or embracing, I should say, what makes me different. So I think we need to get out of that idea that that just needs to not be on our list when we're looking at what makes a strong team or who's the best candidate. That should absolutely be on the list because, again, that plays into us being very intentional on building diverse and inclusive teams.
Payton?
Yeah, I think one thing that could definitely help is from a college recruiting standpoint, right? Like diversity and inclusion. A lot of times certain organizations will go and target, historically Black colleges and universities, but a lot don't, right? But those schools still crank out some very brilliant minds, right? That have a different perspective, a different life experience. Mentorship programs sometimes look a lot different in the Black community versus the white community, right? Sometimes high schools, right? Guidance counselors don't provide the same type of guidance, right? So that's why I really love trying to be involved with some of the innovative learning programs and volunteering, right? Because now kids that might not have the opportunity to understand what a pathway in technology looks like have an example from me. So I encourage not just our leaders, but every employee, right? Do your part, pick up the mantle and try and make us have a more diverse workplace, for the betterment of the company, but also for the betterment of the next generation that's coming up.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks so much, Shanita, please. Yeah, it's interesting to this question because we constantly have looked, and I mentioned names like Magna Yazeri earlier, who leads our kind of global head of diversity and inclusion. To John, your question of D&I. We also have a Ram that's done great work on the media side of our company as a global head of diversity. So we want to include the fact that he's been at the table in these conversations as well. And so I'm grateful when I see Magda and Ram taking leadership mode with our employee resource groups. They're continuing to understand what more do we need in the toolkits that we're putting out to the employees to have these conversations. They're opening up opportunities for us all to have the conversations, such as some of the historic training we've done in like unconscious bias. I think when I spoke with Magda last, it looks as though, we're going to run another series of biases and not even call it unconscious bias, but biases, and have that training and development so we all can listen and learn from professionals in this space. The other piece, I know Rose Kirk heads up our foundation with Diego, and Diego, who is the VLC sponsor for the Bold ERG. So we've had these conversations to the point that I know Rose on the most recent Up to Speed talked about the volunteer program where we can do the walks, et cetera, and get out there during this time and clock some of those miles that we need for our 2.5 million by 2025. But these are all things that we can do for diversity and inclusion and have a message there, or support the work that Rose is doing with the middle schools, and at one time mostly high schools, but now middle school students. We have our Verizon Innovative Learning and STEM programs and providing laptops to underserved communities that have historically not had access to those tools. Once again, we can all be a part of that. And I love Payton's comment on historical Black colleges and universities. I was around long enough where we went out with HR to the college campuses, and we actually had open recs. I'll never forget, I had 3 finance open recs to help fill when I went down to Clark Atlanta University and got a chance to interview folks from Spelman and Morehouse and Clark Atlanta. And we came back with strong candidates that Matt Ellis's finance organization, even partnering with Shane Sanders there, we were able to bring on board. So these are things that I believe, John, to your question, that diversity and inclusion can be done around the company to move these things forward for us. I know our next question, I think, is around, what more can Verizon do? And I know we've talked about a number, and I've given some examples as each of us have. But Shanice, I'd like to come back to you, and then Payton, and then John around. Are there any other things that you think from your own experiences, because we all are who we are from our experiences, that we may have a blind spot to that Verizon could also be doing at this time?
Yeah, I think, a lot of times when we find any problem, we go immediately to trying to solve that problem. I think what we can always do better at is, why does that problem exist? Because you usually find something underlying that leads to that problem. So just being very vigilant about not putting Band-Aids on things, really asking a lot of questions to truly understand where the cracks in the system are, so that we can come up with fixes for them once and for all, right? So we can continue to push ourselves in that way. And then I think, just mentorship and sponsorship, just being able to look to your side, down and up, and see yourself within your company, that gives you a loyalty from employees that you cannot put on a paycheck. that gives you promoters that will go out in the streets and sing about how much they love working at Verizon. But most importantly, it gives you a motivated workforce that says, hey, this can happen for me because I see this, and this person. So I'm going to work twice as hard so that I can get that job. And I'll end with that is my story at Verizon, because I had the pleasure of having Krista Bourne be my region president. When, I was just a retail sales rep and she came to visit my store, and I remember thinking, oh my God, wow, this could really happen if I work hard and, continue to do the work. And so to see Krista now sitting as the head of consumer sales for the company, I cannot tell you the pride that I feel for her, and how much fire that lights in me just to come to work and just light it up and continue my career. So yeah, that's my story. And I want that for everyone else within the company as well.
Great. Payton?
I think right now Verizon has been doing a great job at looking for feedback or ways to improve systems and processes, right? And I think that that's a great thing to help the business. Feedback on ways to encourage communication as well as diversity, I think is another way that Verizon could help and make things better for employees all across our great business here. So that's the feedback that I have.
Great. Hey, John, any thoughts you have on like next steps relative to what more Verizon could do here?
Yeah. I mean, I can maybe just describe how I've approached this, and I've taken this journey in sort of three parts, and I think the company has been, right alongside and helpful in all of them. One is I think there's a personal journey of introspection to be had, and an opportunity to read, and an opportunity to think, and an opportunity to learn. And the company has given a lot of resources to help facilitate that, and my colleagues on the call here today have mentioned a number of other great things. I think that's one important element of it. For me, the second thing is a conversation. Some of those can be one-on-one with individual employees. It's conversations I've had with my whole team, and then my leadership team to talk about how we continue to have that conversation in groups, but fostering that discussion among ourselves, because honestly, for many of us, work is the most diverse place that we operate. It may in many cases be more diverse in our social circles, and we have an opportunity to connect with our colleagues and learn from our colleagues in a way that maybe our personal connections don't facilitate. So, I think that's the really second important thing we need to do. And then the third thing is action based on our increased understanding. And I think for each of us, there will be different ways that we do that. On the call that I did with my team, we focused in on some of the things that the legal team has been working on over the years to address some of the structural causes of racism. We are seeing the examples of issues with police come to the fore, but as has been mentioned on the call, issues in education or voting or criminal justice are all underlying causes that give rise to these issues, and all of those things need to be addressed in order for us to have a just and equal society. So I think each based on our own skill set and our own time and our own inclinations, we'll find things that we can do. But I think the company has done a great job through the foundation and all the communication to identify ways that we can get involved. And then as Shani said, based on our own work, other things we can figure out to do, that are a great fit for us, to help advance the cause. So I think to just bring things to a close by just asking any last words or thoughts to share with the group. Shanice, can I start with you?
Yeah, I can't say how proud I am of what everything that the company has done, everything that we're doing, the conversations that we're having, that are really going to lead to true activism. So I say thank you as an African American employee, because it means more than you can know. And I would just say, I think I said it earlier, but these things, it's a phase. You start with the questions, then you have the conversation. We have to turn the conversation into action. And I think one of the most impressive things that Verizon has done is really given us the opportunity to volunteer for these causes and go beyond having the conversation. So my last thoughts are, I'm hopeful for the future. I'm hopeful for where we're going to end up. And I know that it's to the betterment of our company and our employees. So just really excited to see what else comes from this.
Thank you so much, Shanice. Payton?
So beginning of 2020, I took on a new mantra and a new motto, which was take action. I didn't realize at the beginning of 2020 that my take action was going to be related to so much activism. But I'm really thankful for the opportunity to be a part of today's conversation. I'm really grateful to work for Verizon, a company that is stepping up to try and make change for the better. And I just encourage everybody, just look deep within to help make our society a better place and to make Verizon a better place as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, my final thoughts on John would be, first of all, this has just been a great conversation, great dialogue. I find that I get encouraged and inspired the more the conversations take place. Like listening and learning from each individual here. I want to thank Shanice and Payton so very much for being bold and not just the bold ERG, and helping to have these courageous conversations. And Shanice mentioned Krista Bourne earlier and the inspiration to see Krista in a leadership position and feeling that I too could get to that type of a role. And, I think of Wendy Tassetta within the VBG group, leading commercial operations, probably one of the most vital, important roles we have going in VBG, keeping every other part of VBG straight and working. And one of the things I always think when I hear those two ladies speak is reminding kind of a very succinct point. And I'll leave you with what I'll call the 3 L's. And I just made this up going along and listening to the conversation. But it basically says, listen.
Verizon way, create an acronym for everything.
Exactly.
I know, right?
So I'm going to start with the first L is listen. The second L will be learn. The third L will be lead with action. How's that? Listen, learn, lead with action. And if we do that, we'll be able to say that racism did not, start when I was born, but will racism end in my lifetime? I think that's a big opportunity for us. And as we said the other day, there's a quote from Benjamin Franklin that said, justice will never take place until those that are unaffected are as outraged as those that are affected. So listen, learn, and lead with action. Thanks, John.
That's fantastic. Well, I can't think of a better way to end it. I'll just join you in thanking Payton and Shanice for joining us today for a really fantastic conversation. As we listen to each other and learn from one another, we are laying the foundation for a truly inclusive workplace for everybody and a just society. And I can't think of a more worthy goal. So thank you guys for joining us today for a really fantastic conversation.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.